In this tutorial, we'll look at how you can reuse your documents in a couple of different ways, as well as leverage the out-of-box document library that comes with Polarian. If you haven't seen our other tutorials on working with documents, I'd recommend you do that before going on with this one. Let's start with a simple example of document reuse. Here's a trivial document that lives in the default space of a project I created as a container or library for reusable documents. That can be a good approach if you have documents that are reused in a number of different projects. The doc contains a couple of work items, in this case they're requirements, and once this base document is created, there are a couple of ways we can reuse it. We can reuse it as a new standalone copy, which can be modified, have content added, and so forth, or as a non-modifiable derived document which provides standard content which has to be included in a number of projects. First, let's reuse this base document to create an editable standalone copy. On the Document Editor toolbar, go to Operations and take Reuse Document. You get this dialog where you specify how to reuse the base doc. The reuse option we want is already checked, so I'll just leave that. You will probably use the head revision of the base doc most often, but you have the option of reusing any revision. If you want to use something other than the head, you'll need the revision number from the document history. We'll just go ahead and reuse the head revision for now. You can optionally change the suggested name for the new document. If you're reusing the base document in the same space in the same project, then you have to change the name or save to a different space, otherwise you'll get an error message. You can specify in which project you want to reuse the base doc. If you're reusing a document from a project you maintain as a document library, you'll want to be sure to specify another project here. For simplicity, I'll just reuse the base doc in the same project where we are, even though it's really a library project. You can specify the space in the selected project where you want to store the new document. Since I'm reusing this doc in the same project, I'll put the copy in a different space. How about specification? There are no outgoing links from this document. If there were, I could opt to remove them and not have them show up in the new document. The last thing is whether or not to link the reused doc to the base doc. The thing about the standalone option is that if the base document's content ever changes, the changes will not propagate to the copy we're going to create here. So it might be useful to keep a link back to the base doc to provide an easy way for someone to backtrack to it and see if something changed that impacts the reused copy. If you opt to keep a link to the base doc, you need to select a link role. Whether you choose relates to or is derived from is strictly up to you. You might choose the derived role if you plan to change the base document content in the new copy. So that's it. When I click OK, a copy of my base document is created in the space I specified. And we can take a quick look at it. Notice that the content is the same as the base doc at first, and that all content is editable. Your main takeaway here is that you now have an independent copy of the base document which can be changed in any way. The base doc is unaffected by any changes here, and changes to the content of the base doc cannot be propagated to this one unless you manually synchronize the content yourself. The base document is essentially a template for this new document. Let's return to our base document now and look at the other reuse option. We start the reuse in the same way, Operations, Reuse Document. Then we select the Derived Document option, which I'll talk more about in a few minutes. With this option selected, you then specify the document name and where to store the new document, just as we saw before. Now, our new document is going to be essentially read-only, except that some fields, like maybe status and severity, can be changed unless we specify otherwise. So let's say we also want the severity field to be read-only in the derived document. So I'll go ahead and specify that. And let's go ahead and create the document. And let's go have a look at it. Notice that unlike our standalone reuse document, the content here is not editable. For example, no cut option on the context menu, and nothing changes when I type because, if you remember, we specified the work item title and description to be read-only. If we look at the work item properties, we see I can change status but not severity, which we also made read-only in the derived document. So why would you want derived documents? Well, suppose the requirements we see here are mandated by government regulations and must be implemented in every project in your organization. You can create a base document with those requirements and reuse it as a derived document in the different projects. Let me quickly show you the big advantage of this approach. Let's say the regulations have changed, adding another requirement. I just open the base document and I add a work item defining the new requirement. I then save the document, and I would then need to notify my project teams that the base doc has been changed and advise them to update their derived documents. People on the project team, they can open the derived document. Here's our derived copy. Notice that it doesn't yet reflect the new requirement. It's because propagation is not automatic in order to give you the flexibility of not propagating base document changes. So here I go to Operations and take Update Document. We definitely want the latest, greatest revision, so we'll select keep it on the head, and now we have it. So the base document is in effect our company standard, and changes are easily propagated out to the projects that reuse it as a derived document. Before we wrap this up, let me quickly tell you about something that might save you some time getting started. If your administrators opted to install Polarion's sample data and libraries, you'll be able to access the Document Library project. Use the Open button and navigate into that project. In the Documents and Wiki topic of that project, you'll find a number of documents that you can reuse either as they are or create copies that you modify to suit your needs, creating your own library of documents that people in your organization can use. Go ahead and explore these on your own. You may find that you can leverage them to save time and effort as you get going with Polarion. There's more that I could show you about reusing your document-based assets. For example, it's possible to reuse multiple documents in a single operation. But that's covered in the online help, and much of what you've learned in this tutorial applies, so I think we'll stop here. As always, we welcome your comments on the forum below or by email at info@polarion.com.